I'm Kim.
And I'm Chris Chisholm. We're here at Blue Sky Farm, home of Wolf Camp and the Conservation College. And today we are introducing the Wolf Journey Earth Conservation course, which we are about to launch as an online service to all those who are at home during this time. And if you're seeing this video years from now, remembering that time when we were all at home.
Staying safe.
Yeah, staying safe. And, but this is introducing a course that anybody can do at any time at their own pace. Wolf Journey starts out with book 1, which we're going to start unveiling in a couple of days. It's been 40 days since we've been doing daily broadcasts. In a couple of days, we're switching over to broadcasting daily unveiling of Wolf Journey Earth Conservation courses, book 1, Trail of the Neighborhood Naturalist. And each week we're going to introduce another extra chapter, and then after book 1 is done, over the course of the following seasons and years, we're going to bring you books 2 through 6. Book 2 is Trail of the Traditional Herbalist.
So much fun.
Mm-hmm. Book 3, Trail of the Wildlife Tracker. My favorite thing to do, really. Kim's a self-described bird girl.
And bug girl.
Mm-hmm. That's all in there. All those who love birding and tracking wildlife. And then book 4 is Trail of the Wilderness Survival Scout, and moving these skills of nature into hands-on skills of survival, traditional technologies, wilderness conservation. And book 5 is the Trail of the Sustainable Citizen, which relies on knowledge of permaculture, which is kind of a system of sustainable living. And we're here at Blue Sky Farm, and this entire thing is a permaculture project. And then finally, book 6 is Trail of the Environmental Educator. It already is written. We only share that with our staff, and it is designed as a template or a standardized policies and procedures manual for anybody who wants to run programs of environmental education. It includes earth skills lessons, tons and tons of earth skills lessons that we use at our summer camps and our weekend workshops. And so, you know, we'll just, anybody who wants to, it's based on our policy manual. Anybody wants to use that, we'll talk with you, negotiate maybe using that, because we love for more schools like ours to be set up around the country and world. Yeah, so the introduction to the Wolf Journey. This introduction can be for if you are going to go into book 1, Trail of the Neighborhood Naturalist, or books 2 through 6. And so but before we do that, we just wanted to let you know where we're coming from. Maybe I'll start with Kim by just asking you to talk about, how you got into this place.
How I got into this place?
Yes, well, and I married into this place, Puyallup, Washington.
Yeah.
And this home.
Yeah, so this was my grandparents' house, and I used to come down here every week. I grew up, I don't know, how far do you think it is? Mile or two as the crow flies.
Kim's favorite bird.
Kind of that way. Well, one of many. Well, whichever one I see is my favorite.
They studied in college.
Yeah. Anyway, this was my grandparents' house, and when we moved in, it was just a hayfield and a really old house.
Wow.
With some really old plants.
Right, the whole hayfield is restored. Oh, yes. The end of book 1, Trail of the Neighborhood Naturalist, it guides people through doing a restoration or conservation project, and we have a big one.
Really big one.
About 10 acres.
And so now you can't see it, but it used to be all hay in the front, and now it's our orchard, and there's a pond, and we have a ton of frogs out there, and the wildlife that comes into the yard is amazing. Nothing like it was when we first moved in.
Yeah, Kim's dream was to create this permaculture project, and we have installed it.
We've been doing it.
But for 10 years, and we have another 10 years to go.
Definitely.
Yeah. But how is it that you kind of got interested in nature in the first place? Were you just born with it?
I must have been, actually.
Oh, that's right, because your family.
Because I fell in love with birds at a young age.
Well, they would go camping.
No.
I've heard a couple stories of camping.
We went camping once.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's right.
And I will never forget my itchy bathing suit and my mom making lemonade out of river water, which things are
Don't try that again today.
Don't do that.
Nowadays.
Yeah, so no, I just had this innate passion for birds, and I don't know why. And by the time I made it up to my later elementary school years, fifth and sixth grade, I had an incredible teacher. Both years it was a split class, and he really inspired that love of nature.
Oh,
And it
Mr.
just
Ari.
continued. Yeah, Mr. Ari up at Fruitland Elementary, he was wonderful.
And we're basing
and I think
basically.
he's retired now.
Oh, yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Book one, Trail of the Neighborhood Naturalist, is designed around doing what you did in
Mhm.
Mr. Ari's class.
Yes.
Which is
we went
have a
outside
spot.
once a month, I believe it was, and every kiddo chose their own square foot. And so once a month we would go out to our space, and he would help us, figure out where that was going to be. And we'd go out to our space, and we would draw it to scale, everything that was in it. And so,
And in book one, you're going to have a square foot and a square meter
Around
and a view around it that you're going to be.
yeah, so we're going
returning
to
to
expand
regular-
on that a little bit. But
Oh,
you
and
can,
speaking of which, in all the other books, everybody's going to also it won't be quite as, in all the other books you expand a little bit further and have different spots, but the whole idea of having a study site is pretty key to learn, wouldn't you say?
definitely.
Sorry, so you're going to continue saying more about Mr. Ari? Not so much.
I don't remember now.
Well, what was it when you told your folks that you wanted to study wildlife in college? They said, and then live on the streets, or what did you? What did they? How did they? Your dad is a bit of a joker.
Yeah. I just think that they didn't understand why, but they were incredibly supportive, and so I did it. And went up to University of Washington, joined the wildlife science program, and kind of focused on birds, and had a really wonderful time. And then learned a ton, enjoyed my field work. I spent a summer working on flycatchers, a couple different kinds of flycatchers, did point counts, did some crow stuff. I mean, a lot of really great things. Worked with salamanders. It was just wonderful. And I had some instructors that just taught plant classes, so I got to learn all about all the different trees. And it was a phenomenal experience. And it just built on my passion for birds, and it just grew until I left just about it.
Matter of fact, Kim and I met at the University of Washington Burke Museum of Natural History. It's our first date. It was between that and a lecture on meteorology from Cliff Mass.
Oh yeah. He was presenting at Kane Hall, and I don't know if we were late or what happened, but we ended up seeing the bird.
And the rest is history. Here we are.
Yeah. Here we are.
And we'll be doing these field exercises, these study experiences for the next 2 years. This is my study site, by the way. This is this porch. I'm going to do everything on here, showing that wolf journey can be done on a balcony, or it can be done in an apartment with a stoop, or if you have a little park or a corner of your yard nearby, it can be done there. Now, if you're lucky enough to live in the wilderness,
that's great.
Very exciting. And Kim's study site's going to be a little bit more. We fortunately have really cool edges and water.
There's so many different places you could choose I could choose because everything's different. There's plants, insects, everything is different all over.
Now,
it's all great.
Yeah, when you start going through these books or your chosen book, you can consider yourself, even if you've never taken your shoes off and walked through the grass before, starting with the very first study experience, you can consider yourself a naturalist, because it's really what you do, the lifestyle you lead is really defines you in part. And so if you go through book one, Trail of the Neighborhood Naturalist, you will be a naturalist during that time. We're all somewhere along the journey.
That's what I was
expertise.
just going to say. Some people just have a little more experience and more time involved. It doesn't mean that you're not on that journey.
Or if you go into book two, Trail of the Herbalist, you will be an herbalist during that time, because you're going to be working with plants and making plant medicine and cooking wild edible foods, all those sorts of things. And book three, Trail of the Wildlife Tracker, you may not know how to interpret a deer track, but as you're doing it, you're going to be tracking kind of sometimes as much as experienced trackers, because it is a nonstop humbling experience to try to follow a trail.
That's true.
And if you start into your survival skills, Trail of the Wilderness Survival Scout, I mean, sometimes you just have to be dropped off and survive. And some people do it with absolutely no experience, better than those who've been going to classes for a long time. Because, sometimes takes a certain force of will to do it. And so if you want to, then you are a Wilderness Survival Scout. Same thing with Sustainable Citizen, or a permaculture pioneer, as I like to call it. Whoa!
Whoa! Wow.
Got a little gray
Speaking
squirrel
of
that just
wildlife
ran
tracking
right by.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, follow that. Got some nice bird songs going on as well. Song Sparrow.
I think. Oh,
yes.
wait, or was it the wren?
Oh, was it a Buick String? We'll have to listen to it one more time. Should be calling just a second. Hear a lot of the mason bees going in and out of our little mason bee spot there. Yeah, and obviously, Trail is an environmental educator. If you learn one thing out in your yard and you turn around and you show a child, I mean, you are an environmental educator. There you go. Just stay one step ahead of them. As a matter of fact, a lot of times, classroom teachers, that's what we do. Is we're like, oh, we're being asked because nobody else is available to do it on staff to go in and teach a class all semester long on something we weren't trained to do, so we have to prep all night before, and there we are, a teacher of that thing. All right, so consider yourself, a naturalist or whatever it is that you choose to do, and we encourage you to go for it. Really important to this is the background and history. From we are standing on the shoulders of giants through history, starting with the great naturalists of the 19th and 20th centuries, especially, who in our description, if you go into Wolf Journey, into our website and click on Wolf Journey, and then click on the intro to Wolf Journey, we go through quite a few paragraphs of all the different great outdoors and environmental leaders that came before us. The great naturalists, of course, John Muir, Rachel Carson, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, all the way back to Charles Darwin and Thoreau and Emerson, and everybody who inspired this movement and got things to the place they are now, protecting endangered species, clean water, all the things that were lacking just a few decades ago. And the wildlife trackers who, like the Peterson, Roger Torrey Peterson, who took James John Audubon's field guides and to the next level. The ethnobotanists and traditional herbalists that we have learned from over the years, just wonderful people to this day, are just incredible herbalists. The people that have done traditional technology and what they call primitive skills, like the Society of Primitive Technology, amazing learning and very scientific based as well, studying their
which is what
technologies. And of course, that is built on all the traditions, the indigenous traditions around the world of there's 20 some ways to make fire by friction. We have to honor the indigenous leaders, and to this day, be careful not to, appropriate, these technologies that are under ownership of certain people, and we need to ask permission to be able to not necessarily use them all the time, but for sure, if we're showing them, or certainly if money is involved in any ways. And then permaculture, the greats that started permaculture in the early 70s, and our own Earth Skills mentors, like I first really, and of course I was raised in northern Minnesota and Wisconsin, outdoors all the time, hunting and fishing. My parents are great environmentalists. We had a wonderful cabin that we would go to. As a matter of fact, my dad, when I was 10 years old, walked me out in the middle of the night. I think it was about 10 p.m. though, in the summer, sat me on our big rock, which I do know that it was about a half mile from the cabin because we go there regularly now. However, I've tried to find that rock, and it certainly wasn't that big because I can barely find that rock now. But man, I was scared to death. Every little scritch and scratch I thought was a bear, and there were a lot of bears around.
So it could have been.
Yeah, but the next morning, or in the middle of the night, during that time, I can't remember which day or night it was, but we heard wolves howl, and we just blew it off as being maybe some really cool coyotes. which we never heard howl around the cabin before either. But we didn't know that wolves had moved down from Minnesota into Wisconsin by 1979, and there were packs starting to maybe establish by then. Of course, we've learned since GPS collaring has occurred that wolves travel thousands of miles looking for mates. And I mentioned in the intro to Wolf Journey a story about a couple of those wolves and how much we've learned. And so, during this time when some people are having a hard time, or if, it's difficult to change to a lifestyle of an outdoor lifestyle, just think about those wolves who were almost eliminated from North America. And a few left in northern Minnesota and in Canada and Alaska. And they've come back despite ups and down public opinion about them. So approaches you can take to the Wolf Journey Earth Conservation course. You can do it daily with us. Just go right through the videos that we're going to be producing live. So this is all raw. Or you can do a once a week approach. Now, if you go every day, you'll be finishing a season and earn a certificate in your area of specialty or interest. You can also take it week by week at your own pace. And that's an interesting approach because you can learn pretty far in depth. Say you take the 20 chapters once a week. Or should I say each field exercise 1 week. That's 4 times 20, 80. It's about almost a year and a half, 2 years, if you consider, traveling and vacations and breaks and things like that. And knowing these skills, observing your study site, returning to that place every season, and then all through a year, seeing how water moves and the seasons change, and then doing it for another year and learning those patterns. I mean, that is in-depth learning, and you can take that knowledge. It's like the scientific method, apply it anywhere around the world, and you'll see the same patterns happening anywhere in nature with different players, different characters, obviously, depending on where you're located and you move to. But you'll notice that, that bird does the exact same thing as the, Bewick's wren, over wherever Bewick's wrens don't exist. They're playing those particular niches, and so it's a really great approach. Scientific approach to gaining these skills of that Wolf Journey presents. So, as we described in the introduction to Wolf Journey, set your goals. Know that it has some ramifications on your life, so definitely check in with your family and friends, get their advice, maybe even do it with a partner.
That could be fun.
Now, that can be demotivating. If they stop doing it, you have to be ready to keep doing it. But at least they'll understand what you're doing. It's good to maybe start out with somebody, if they're in your life regularly.
Sort of like how we're going to do it. You're going to do it here on the porch. I'm going to do it in my spot.
Yeah. But of course it is, can be a wonderful solitary experience. Certainly that's how I approached it in my 20s when I was inspired to do it in this way after reading a Tom Brown book. He calls it the Sit Spot. And then his first student, John Young, actually created a curriculum called the Kamana, which is still being offered through the Wilderness Awareness School that he founded back in the 90s. And that has a particular beautiful, in-depth, spiritual take to going through skills of learning how to become a naturalist. For those that, really would benefit from that way to go, I definitely recommend the Kamana as well. Checking into that. Also the resources, check out these books. You want to find any bird book that's best in your area nowadays, because Bird Books was the first field guide with Audubon. Now there's probably 10 that are pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Kim's a Peterson.
I'm a Peterson girl.
She says.
Yeah.
And now I love wildlife tracking. So for our Pacific Northwest, this is the one to get. But books by Mark Elbrock are the tops, as well as Jim Halpine, pretty good, especially if you want to start with a smaller book. You have to get Botany in a Day by Thomas Elpel. Oh my goodness, anywhere in North America, that is the book to really understand plants, families, and also the best edible and medicinal knowledge, research, and practical use that he's done. We love books by Rosemary Gladstar for herbalism, and of course you have to get your local field guide, whatever's best in your area for your plants. No, don't have to get them right away. You can do the entire first few chapters of Wolf Journey with nothing, and so you just want to find and think about it and research and get reviews. Find
And
out
you know, you
what
can.
want to get.
I don't know if you can get books from the library, but a lot of information is available online too.
Yeah.
So you
So
don't even
much
really need a
easier.
book. Or there's an app, or a great app. So maybe we can talk about them during the actual.
I remember when the CDs first came out on
Oh,
bird songs.
Yeah, because you
Oh,
used to
they
have to
were
listen to
so
it. You
great.
used to have to listen to a cassette tape.
Oh, the tape.
And then
You had to fast forward
and
somewhere.
rewind,
And
then
now it's
use
great.
your pencil to tighten it.
Go to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology website and you click in,
Yep, and it tells you.
or you just put in on your app a couple of
But we'll
2 or
talk-
3
let's talk apps
descriptors, and it'll pop up
yeah.
with probable.
We can recommend
oh,
some
it's
really
so
good ones.
great! You can learn so fast nowadays. I love it. Anyways, so. And then at the end of this introductory wolf journey, it's quite a long page. But of course there's a you can skip to things. There's you basically just get going by downloading or copying and pasting into Google Drive folder and document, or however you want to do it, or just print it out and do the good old fashioned naturalist journal. Here's an old one of mine.
3-ring binder.
Yeah, 3-ring binder, because it got pretty thick and I could just put in more and more and more and more species studies and things like that I did. Here's this was bound by one of my very first students, youth students who did Wolf Journey back in the day. That was cool. So we do recommend doing what the great naturalists always did, which was kept a journal. And or you can just do a blog, which is great, and then you can upload your photos and videos of things that happen out in the field to there. It's really wonderful. We'll put some links for some of the old blogs that people have done. I think of Wolf Journey if they're still up. And then we also it's great to have this little Earth Skills assessment. This was another idea that John Young had that was great, which was just to kind of fill out a little assessment of yourself at first with these questions. And then when you're done with your Wolf Journey book, you can go back and look and compare how much you learned over time by looking back at this and going, oh, that was easy after you finished. You should have known those things. Well, that's pretty much the intro that we're going to give. Each of the chapters I do want to introduce with a story as well as a song, because I think it really helps ground and inspire people to get out there in nature. It's something about the outdoors and music that are a great combination. And so I'm going to bring a little bit of Wolf Camp to you by singing a song. This was my first song I ever wrote back. I was on my study year abroad, and I was missing northern Wisconsin and the wolves pretty dramatically at the time. It goes something like this. I've got a story, me a son of Europe, I learned it all. When the wind would stir up, the spirits would howl. Whistle through the forest and I'd sit afraid, just listening to the chorus. I've got a deep feeling like I've done something wrong, so it took me a while now to make up that song. What a true story I learned as I heard, holding up down to know the word. It's in the table, the long tracks, when one's around, and the red loves the magic with the spirits have returned, leaving tracks on tracks, a rabbit surprise. What we have learned is a wolf has human habits. Eat that munch and crunch and bite, overthrown, the killing the fight is as we see it night, brightening in a glow. From the distance we assume what we did not know. Hey, we know it well, the hunter says. landmark. There's a sun that lingers around, a sun that's been shot, bleeding on the ground. And the mother and the sister have not yet found out that one family member will no longer shout. Hey, I'm back on the world, let's go for a run. It's been a long night, let's beat the dogs, drop my stroking out your gutter with the laughter and singing, coming like a family together and struggling. Tale of the wolf is long and tragic since the white ones arrived, and the red loves of magic, but the spirits have returned, leaving tracks on tracks of rabbits. Surprised what we have learned, the wolf is here in Now that's some nice singing up there. Beautiful. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We welcome you to the journey. We wish you wonderful experiences out there. You need to know how to be safe, of course, if you're in tick country and other things. But don't let that stop you. You have to take your mitigating risks and be safe in this day, in this age, in nature, in society, and we wish you well. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Bye.
See you out there in nature, and happy trails.